Untamed Frontier, A Tale of Love in the Old West by Oliver Hale. Colorado Territory, 1875. Sarah Mitchell gripped the worn leather handle of her carpetbag as the stagecoach lurched over another rut in the rough road. She braced herself against the wooden bench, her body swaying with the vehicle's movements. 3 days of travel had left her exhausted, her blue calico dress wrinkled in her chestnut hair, escaping its once neat arrangement. "Not much farther to Silver Creek, miss," the elderly gentleman across from her said kindly, noticing her fatigue. "My 3rd time making this journey. Gets rougher every year, but the view never disappoints." Sarah managed a small smile. "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to reaching our destination." What she didn't say was how desperately she needed this journey to be worth the risk she'd taken. At 24, she had abandoned her secure but stifling life in Philadelphia to answer an advertisement for a seamstress position at the Silver Bell Hotel. The decision had horrified her aunt, who had raised her since her parents' death and had envisioned a very different future for her niece. "A respectable marriage is what you need," Aunt Gertrude had insisted, "not some wild adventure out west with uncivilized folk in dangerous conditions." But Sarah had made her choice. Years of sewing for wealthy Philadelphia society ladies had left her with exceptional skills but an empty spirit. The West called to her with promises of independence and possibility. The stagecoach rounded a bend and Silver Creek came into view below them, a cluster of wooden buildings nestled in a valley between towering mountains. Sarah caught her breath at the majesty of the landscape, so different from the crowded city streets she'd known all her life. "There she is," the driver called down. "Silver Creek." Thomas Reeves stood on the porch of his general store, watching the twice-weekly stagecoach make its way down the mountain pass. At 32, he'd built a successful business and earned respect throughout the territory, though few knew the full story of what had brought him west. He adjusted his sleeve to better cover the scar that ran along his forearm, a permanent reminder of the war between the states and the life he'd left behind in Virginia. 8 years in Silver Creek had helped heal many wounds, but some marks remained, both visible and hidden. "Stage is running late again," commented Sheriff Daniel Walker, who had paused on his daily rounds. "Wagner says there's a new girl coming to work for Clara at the hotel." Thomas nodded. "Town's growing. Clara needs the help." "It might be good for you to meet someone new," the sheriff said with a knowing smile. "Can't keep yourself buried in ledgers forever." Thomas gave his friend a pointed look. "I'm quite content with my ledgers, thank you." The sheriff chuckled and continued on his way, leaving Thomas to his thoughts. He hadn't been completely honest with his friend. The truth was, he found himself increasingly aware of a loneliness that his business success couldn't fill. But he had learned the hard way that some dreams came at too high a price. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of the Silver Bell Hotel across the street. Thomas watched as passengers disembarked, first a traveling salesman he recognized, then an elderly couple, and finally a young woman he'd never seen before. Even from a distance, he could see she carried herself with dignity despite her travel-worn appearance. She looked up suddenly, seeming to sense his gaze, and for a moment their eyes met across the street. Thomas quickly looked away and retreated inside his store, unsettled by the unexpected connection. Sarah's first week in Silver Creek passed in a blur of new faces and experiences. Clara Wagner, the hotel's middle-aged proprietress, proved to be fair but demanding, expecting excellence in every stitch Sarah produced for the hotel's linens and occasional customer alterations. "You have skilled hands," Clara acknowledged after inspecting Sarah's first completed project, Philadelphia training shows. "But out here, you'll need to work faster. People can't wait weeks for fancy stitching." "I understand," Sarah replied. "I'm learning to adapt." She was adapting to more than just her work. Silver Creek operated by different rules than Philadelphia. Women here spoke their minds more freely, men tipped their hats with genuine respect rather than mere formality, and the line between social classes blurred in a community where survival often depended on neighbors helping neighbors. Sarah's small room above the hotel provided her first true privacy. No aunt to monitor her comings and goings, no social obligations to fulfill. The freedom was both exhilarating and terrifying. On Sunday morning, Sarah put on her best dress, a navy blue wool with minimal trim, and joined the procession of townspeople heading to the small white church at the end of Main Street. Clara had insisted she attend, Not for religious reasons but for practical ones. If you're staying in Silver Creek, people need to know you, Clara had explained. Church is where that happens. Inside the simple building, Sarah slipped into a pew near the back, hoping to observe without drawing attention. But in a small town, new faces were noticed immediately. "You must be Miss Mitchell," said a gray-haired woman, sliding in beside her. "I'm Mrs. Henderson. My husband runs the assay office. Clara mentioned you're from Philadelphia. My cousin visited there once. Found it terribly crowded." Before Sarah could respond, others gathered around, introducing themselves and asking questions that teetered between friendly interest and outright curiosity. The attention overwhelmed her until a deep voice interrupted. "Folks, perhaps we might give Miss Mitchell a chance to catch her breath before the inquisition continues." Sarah looked up to see the man she had noticed watching her arrival from across the street. Up close, she could see that his face carried the weathered look of someone who spent time outdoors, though his clothes marked him as a businessman rather than a rancher. His eyes were a striking blue that contrasted with his dark hair, and when he smiled, it transformed his serious expression. "Thomas Reeves," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "I run the general store. Welcome to Silver Creek." "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Thank you for the rescue, Mr. Reeves." "No rescue necessary. Just evening the odds," he said with a hint of amusement. "Silver Creek is enthusiastic about newcomers, especially," he stopped himself. "Especially unmarried women?" Sarah finished for him, raising an eyebrow. A genuine smile broke across his face. "I was going to say especially talented ones, but you've clearly already learned how things work here." Their conversation was cut short as the service began, but Sarah found herself distracted throughout the sermon, aware of Thomas Reeves sitting several pews ahead, his straight posture and attentive manner suggesting a man of discipline and consideration. Over the next few weeks, Sarah settled into the rhythm of life in Silver Creek. Her days were filled with work, sewing torn shirts, hemming trousers, creating curtains for the hotel's dining room, and occasionally designing a dress for one of the town's more prosperous women. Her nimble fingers stayed busy, but her mind often wandered. She found herself watching for Thomas Reeves during her infrequent trips to the general store, telling herself she merely appreciated his respectful manner in a town where single women were often viewed as curiosities or opportunities. On one such visit, she was examining spools of thread when his voice came from behind her. "The blue would complement your latest project." Sarah turned, surprised. "How did you know about my project?" "Mrs. Peterson couldn't stop talking about the dress you're making for her daughter's wedding," Thomas explained. "News travels fast here." "So I've noticed," Sarah replied, selecting the blue thread. "In Philadelphia, I could work for months without my clients ever crossing paths. Here, everyone seems to know what I had for breakfast before I've finished eating it." Thomas laughed, the sound warming the space between them. "It takes adjustment. When I first arrived, I found it intrusive. Now, I see it differently." "And how do you see it?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "As people caring enough to notice," he said simply. "There's value in being seen, Miss Mitchell." The way he looked at her as he said it, as if he truly saw her, not just the seamstress or the newcomer from the East, made Sarah's cheeks warm. "Will you be attending the Founders' Day celebration next weekend?" he asked, changing the subject. "Clara has commissioned me to create bunting for the hotel's display," Sarah replied. "She insists I attend to ensure everything is properly placed." "Then perhaps you'll save a dance for me?" Thomas asked, his confidence faltering slightly. Sarah smiled. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Reeves." As she left the store, thread and buttons carefully wrapped in brown paper, Sarah felt a flutter of anticipation that had nothing to do with fabric or festivities. The days before the celebration were filled with preparations. The entire town participated, sweeping boardwalks, hanging decorations and planning food for the communal tables that would line Main Street. Sarah worked late into the evenings, her fingers flying across fabric as she completed not only Clara's bunting but also a new dress for herself, a cornflower blue cotton with delicate white piping that flattered her figure without being overly bold. On the morning of the celebration, Sarah helped Clara arrange the hotel's contribution to the feast, apple pies and roasted chickens, before returning to her room to prepare. She took extra care with her appearance, arranging her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical knot. "Well, don't you look fine?" Clara commented when Sarah descended the stairs. The older woman's expression softened. "It's good to see you embracing life here." I'm trying, Sarah admitted. It's different from what I expected. Life usually is, Clara replied wisely. The key is finding joy in the difference. The celebration began at noon with a speech from the mayor recounting Silver Creek's founding 20 years earlier. Children ran races while adults chatted in groups, sampling food and enjoying music provided by local musicians. Sarah found herself introduced to ranchers from outlying properties and miners from the hills above town. She was helping serve lemonade when Thomas appeared beside her, looking handsome in a crisp white shirt and dark vest. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted her, "you look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," she replied, suddenly conscious of how different he seemed outside the confines of his store, more relaxed, his smile reaching his eyes. When the fiddlers struck up a lively tune and couples began to dance in the cleared street, Thomas extended his hand. "I believe you promised me a dance." Sarah placed her hand in his, feeling the strength in his grip as he led her to join the other dancers. His confidence guided her through steps she didn't know, his hand at her waist both proper and thrilling. "You dance well for a shopkeeper," she teased as they circled each other. "And you follow admirably for a woman who clearly prefers to lead," he countered with a smile that took any sting from his words. They danced through 3 songs before stopping for refreshment, both slightly breathless. Thomas handed Sarah a cup of lemonade, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Would you care to walk?" he asked. "The view from the church hill is particularly fine this time of day." Sarah hesitated only briefly before nodding. They strolled away from the celebration, maintaining a proper distance between them yet feeling a growing connection that transcended physical space. At the top of the hill, they paused to look out over the valley, the town below them alive with movement and sound. "What brought you to Silver Creek, Mr. Reeves?" Sarah asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "You don't strike me as someone born to the frontier." Thomas was quiet for a moment, his expression turning contemplative. "The war changed many things for many people. My family's plantation in Virginia didn't survive, and afterward I needed something untainted." Sarah noticed how his hand unconsciously moved to his sleeve, and she wondered about the story hidden there. "And you found that here?" she asked gently. "I found possibility," he replied, "a place where a man is judged by his actions rather than his history. What about you, Miss Mitchell? Philadelphia to Silver Creek is quite a journey." Sarah looked out over the valley. "I was suffocating in a life planned by others. My aunt had my future mapped out, a suitable marriage, a suitable home, suitable activities for a suitable lady." She shook her head. "I wanted to make my own choices, even if they weren't considered suitable." "And are you satisfied with your choice?" Thomas asked, studying her face. "I'm beginning to be," she answered truthfully, meeting his gaze. Their relationship evolved gradually over the following weeks. Thomas began finding reasons to visit the hotel, delivering fabrics that had just arrived, offering to help adjust a stubborn window in the dining room, bringing a book of poetry he thought Sarah might enjoy. For her part, Sarah discovered needs that only the general store could fulfill, specific buttons that simply wouldn't do to order by mail, questions about local customs that only Thomas could answer, small gifts for Clara's birthday that required careful selection. "You're fooling exactly no one," Clara informed her one evening as Sarah returned from yet another trip to the store. "That man looked at you the same way my late husband looked at me 30 years ago." Sarah blushed. "We're friends, Clara." "Friends who can't stop smiling when they're together," Clara observed shrewdly. "There are worse foundations for something more." Something more. The possibility both thrilled and frightened Sarah. She had come west for independence, not to enter another relationship where her identity might be subsumed. Yet Thomas never made her feel diminished. If anything, his interest and respect enhanced her sense of self. Their first real outing together came when Thomas invited her to Sunday dinner at the home he had built on the edge of town, a modest but solid structure with a small orchard behind it. "My housekeeper will be present," he assured her, understanding the proprieties that still govern their interactions. "Mrs. Lorson is a formidable chaperone and an excellent cook." The afternoon revealed new facets of Thomas. His home contained more books than Sarah had expected, the shelves in his study filled with volumes on history, philosophy, and literature. A piano stood in one corner of the parlor. "Do you play?" Sarah asked, running her fingers lightly over the keys. "Poorly," Thomas admitted. "But music was important in my family. Having the instrument reminds me of better times." After a dinner that confirmed Mrs. Larson's culinary skills, they sat on the porch, watching twilight soften the landscape. "I've been corresponding with my aunt," Sarah said. "She's horrified that I've become a common seamstress in a rough mining town and insists I return to civilization before my reputation is beyond repair." Thomas chuckled. "And what did you tell her?" "That I've found more honest civilization here than in some of Philadelphia's finest drawing rooms," Sarah replied. She hesitated before adding, "and that I've met people worth knowing." The look Thomas gave her made her heart race, but he maintained his composure. "I'm glad to be counted among them." As summer faded to early fall, tragedy struck Silver Creek. A fire broke out in the livery stable, spreading quickly to adjacent buildings. The entire town mobilized to fight the blaze, forming bucket lines from the creek to the burning structures. Sarah worked alongside other women, tearing sheets into bandages for those injured in the firefighting efforts. When word came that Thomas had been hurt helping rescue horses from the stable, cold fear gripped her. She found him sitting on a crate behind the mercantile, his shirt sleeve cut away to reveal a burn along his arm, ironically parallel to the old scar she had occasionally glimpsed. "You're hurt," she said unnecessarily, kneeling beside him with clean bandages and salve. "It's not serious," he assured her, though his face was tight with pain. "Let me be the judge of that," Sarah replied, gently cleaning the burn. As she worked, she asked quietly, "Is this how you got the other scar? Helping others without regard for yourself?" Thomas looked surprised, then resigned. "You noticed." "I noticed many things about you, Thomas," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. He was silent as she applied salve to the burn. Finally, he spoke. "The other scar came from Gettysburg. I was a lieutenant in the Confederate cavalry." Sarah's hands stilled briefly, then continued their work. "Virginia. A plantation." It made sense now. "Many good men fought on both sides," she said carefully. "I lost faith in the cause long before the end," Thomas admitted. "But by then, too many friends had died for me to abandon them." He looked at her intently. "Does it matter to you which side I fought for?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "What matters is the man you've become since then." Relief washed over his face. "After the war, I couldn't stay in Virginia. Too many ghosts. I traveled west with little more than determination and the education my father had insisted upon." He gave a wry smile. "Turns out bookkeeping skills are valuable anywhere." As Sarah finished bandaging his arm, Thomas caught her hand in his. "Thank you for not judging me by a past I cannot change." "We all have pasts, Thomas," she replied. "It's our present choices that define us." In the weeks following the fire, their relationship deepened. They began taking regular Sunday afternoon rides into the surrounding countryside, Miss Larson accompanying them as propriety demanded, though she tactfully remained with the buggy when they stopped to explore a meadow or view. During one such outing, standing beside a creek that tumbled over rocks on its journey down the mountain, Thomas finally spoke the words that had been building between them. "I love you, Sarah," he said simply. "I had not expected to find love again, especially not with a headstrong Eastern woman who challenges my every assumption." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining. "And I had not expected to lose my carefully won independence to a Southern gentleman turned frontier shopkeeper." "You would never lose your independence with me," Thomas assured her earnestly. "What I love most is your spirit. I would never ask you to diminish it." "Then perhaps we might find a new independence together," Sarah suggested, reaching for his hand. Thomas drew her closer. "I have a proposition. The building next to the mercantile has been empty since the milliner left. What would you think of establishing your own dressmaking shop? There's growing demand in town, and with the railroad coming next year." Sarah stared at him. "You want me to start my own business?" "I want you to have options," Thomas clarified, "whether as my wife or simply as the woman I love." "Are those options separate in your mind?" Sarah asked carefully. Thomas smiled. "I'm proposing both, Sarah. Marriage and partnership, in whatever form best preserves who you are while allowing us to be together." Sarah's heart swelled with emotion. This was so far from the future her aunt had envisioned for her. Yet it felt more right than anything she had ever known. "Yes," she said to both. When Thomas kissed her, with the mountains rising around them and the creek singing over stones, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true destination. Their wedding took place in Silver Creek's church as winter approached. the interior warmed by wood stoves and decorated with evergreen boughs. Sarah wore a dress of deep blue velvet that she had created herself, with silver buttons from Thomas's store fastening the bodice. Clara stood as Sarah's witness, her usual practical demeanor softened by genuine happiness for the couple. Sheriff Walker stood beside Thomas, grinning broadly at his friend's good fortune. The celebration afterward filled the Silver Bells dining room, the entire town turning out to congratulate the couple. Even Sarah's aunt had sent a grudging letter of good wishes, along with a silver tea service that Clara promised to keep safe until the couple's new home was ready. For Thomas had been building again, expanding his house to include a proper sewing room with north-facing windows for the best light, and a larger library where their books could mingle on shared shelves. Late in the evening, as the celebration continued around them, Thomas drew Sarah into a quiet corner. "Happy?" he asked, searching her face. "Completely," she assured him, "though I warn you I still intend to open that shop." Thomas laughed. "I would expect nothing less. Silver Creek needs more than a general store to become the town it could be." "And what do you need, Thomas Reeves?" Sarah asked, suddenly serious. "Only you," he answered, "exactly as you are." As they rejoined their guests, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west seeking independence and found it in the most unexpected way, through a love that expanded rather than limited her sense of possibility. The frontier had tested them both, revealing their true characters and capacity for growth. Their shared future would hold challenges, but Sarah faced them without fear, knowing they would meet them together, two souls who had found in each other not completion but amplification of their best selves. In Silver Creek, beneath the vast Colorado sky, they had discovered that love at its finest wasn't about possession or control, but about the freedom to become more fully who they were meant to be. The end.